In our present, somewhat disordered age, in a small city nearby, there lived a young man named Jake. Jake was a nice fellow, by all accounts, and was, with no disrespect intended, a very ordinary young man, with one single exception. He could remember all of his past lives. Unlike most of us, Jake was entirely aware that he had lived dozens of lives before this one, and could even remember details about them. This did not bother him or get in his way at all. It was just more information that he had in his brain that most of us don't. The rest of his life was ordinary. Like the rest of us, he looked out at the world and thought that maybe even for sure, that all the world must be coming to an end. Oftentimes, we all worry about things like that. The situation does not always seem particularly hopeful. But unlike most of us, Jake was experienced with this. Jake could remember being a hunter-gatherer in a small tribe living in a system of caves. Jake had been lucky enough to have been one of the very first humans. But life was very scary for the first humans, and many things would come their way, presenting grave dangers and sudden changes. Everyone then thought that the world was ending. But Jake knew it hadn't ended, because he'd lived once more, on the island of Atlantis. He had seen the great, advanced, radiant civilization that once was. And Jake was there when the great waters came, on that awful day when the sea came to drag all of it down to the lost depths. And on that day, had been very certain that the world was ending. And of course, Atlantis itself had ended, but the world had not. Jake knew this because he lived once more, this time in Mesopotamia, finding that the world and all the life in it had indeed continued, even if Atlantis had not. But the gods walked about the world in those days, and they were often lacking in mercy. Civilizations were wiped out, often without warning, and all the people said the world was ending. But then, there he was, a little while later, in ancient Egypt, discovering once more that everything had nonetheless continued still further. It was another great civilization, and he loved it dearly. One day, though, the great catastrophe came, shaking the world and setting back humanity thousands of years. The pyramids, to this day, have still not been turned back on. Everyone who was there, including Jake, had very good reason to believe that the world was ending. It didn't end, though, because he soon found himself in the Roman Empire in what we now call the 1st century in Judea. This was an awfully exciting and dynamic time period, almost too much so, after all he'd seen and been through already. Everyone everywhere in those days insisted that the world was ending very soon, except the Romans, whose maintenance of their empire depended upon the continuation of the world. At the time, Jake found it somewhat ironic that if you spoke too loudly about the world coming to an end, the Romans would end your world. In a sense, this seemed to prove all those doomsday claims correct. But he woke up again, once more to new life, now in medieval times. You wouldn't even believe all the variations on Armageddon Jake heard in that life. Everyone said the world was ending, in all manner of creative ways. It still hadn't ended when, to his shock, he discovered modernity, and unfortunately for him, World War I. It was the Great War, the war to end all wars, and it seemed to everyone that so much would never be the same, that the world had ended indeed. But neither the world nor wars were ended then, for he next saw the Second World War. Soon he would be terrified by the threat of nuclear annihilation, which sounded, as much as anything he had ever seen, which again was much more than most, like the end of the world, for real this time. But it never happened. He went on to find himself as worlds ended faster and faster, even within the same life, the new ones scrambling to begin behind them. After all of this, though, here he is today. The world is still ending to some, but Jake actually knows better. Jake knows the world always goes on, that we always live again, because all of it just continues, and life never leaves the universe.
When Lucy was just past her 30th birthday, she thought about her life. She wasn't unhappy exactly. She was grateful for what she had, and she enjoyed life for the most part. But when she thought about the whole world and what was possible within it, she knew in her heart that so much was missing, so much that could add to the color and brightness of the world. So Lucy had a party with her friends because she knew that friends are important, and celebration and fun are too. She felt good at that little party, and it gave her ideas. She thought the world would be even better if she found a way to express herself through art, because she could sense that all of us are creative beings, and that creative expression is as important as eating. Her soul filled up from her creative work, and she began to collaborate with others, creating larger projects that helped more and more people contribute to the bright and ripe fruits of their souls to the world. She volunteered to help those who had less than she did, because she could see that even the tiniest reduction in anxiety and need among the smallest number of people could still add color and brightness to the world. She did favors for her friends, helped everyone without being asked, without ever wanting anything in return, because it would also make the world more colorful and more filled with light. She got directly involved in civic life and encouraged her friends and colleagues and partners to do so too. After all, if they thought so highly of one another, shouldn't they together give of their merit for the good of all people? She felt that life lacked connection to the spiritual side of the world, lacked rituals and rites to mark time and make sense of life, so she started a religious community and introduced simple rituals that helped everyone grow and find greater harmony. What started as a party became regular feasts and festivals, banquets and carnivals, baptisms, comings of age, betrothals and weddings, even funerals when necessary. Funerals in which death had entirely lost its sting because some of the things that were missing in the world had been found by Lucy. She knew she had started no revolution or movement, had caused no Herculean shift in the Earth's axis, or really ever did anything anybody ever knew about outside of her family and friends, and maybe others in her town. But she knew that she had the ability as a creative being to create good. If good could be created from nothing, its potential must always exist everywhere. And if that's true, it's always possible for good to happen. Lucy knew that this meant that hope had to be real, and she told everyone that she could find.
Emily always tried to be cheerful as she took her daily walk. But by early March, even though it was beautiful, she felt deficient in vitamin D and demoralized and tired of the winter. It began to feel like spring would never come.
But still, she walked again the next day, and the next. Every day until the next week, and then she could tell changes were happening. It seemed impossible, and yet, just as everyone said it would, spring was arriving. The winter could not last. Spring would always march forward.
It reminded her, she thought to herself with a smile, of how she often doubted, when going to bed, that it would ever be morning again.
But morning always came. It always does, just like spring.
The world is hopeless by many measures. that any of us might put forward. But we are, by our nature, creatures of hope.
We are born with it, each and every one of us, deep within us. And we can call it forth from what seems like the void. We have the ability to create it, all of us, at any time and in any place. This, perhaps more than anything else, is the great blessing of our birthright as humans.
The other thing we can do is share this hope with others. When we ask the divine that we ourselves be granted hope, it is for this reason, above all others, that we make our request.
Life never leaves the universe. The world never ends. Hope is always available, and spring always comes.